Okay, so to kick off with the tutorials, I'll be running through the topics we will be covering during this session. So we'll be covering the first topic we'll be looking at is the industry overview. We just want to give an overview of the industry, the logistics of learning how to code. This topic we cover those items you need to make the learning process a bit easier for you, and then we move over to how to get a job in the industry, and then the career part. The career part is essentially the roles you might want to apply for, the roles you might want to work in. So then we now move over to the fifth item on the list, which is the type of technologies you will be actually making use of when you start working in the industry. And then the sixth item is the learning part. In the learning part, I just want to give a strategy or the approach you can use to become an expert within a short period of time. That's basically what I used during my own time. Then the last item we are going to look at is the coding fundamentals. So these are the 7 items we'll be covering during this tutorial. Let's move straight to the first topic there, which is the industry overview. For the industry overview, we will be looking at 3 subtopics, which is the main activities that you encounter within the industry, and then the major markets within the industry, and finally the current industry trend. So looking at the main activities within the industry can be categorized into 6. That is planning. When you come into the software industry and you get into the project mode, there are certain activities that you carry out during your software development process. It is called the software development life cycle. So I want to cover those items, those activities that happens within the life cycle. The first activity is the planning. Then we have the analysis. Then we have the design. Within the design, we have the UI UX design, and then we have the software design. The UI UX design is the user interface and the user experience design. Then we have the software design properly. Then we have development. Then we have testing, and then deployment and maintenance. In the mind map I posted on Facebook, we have these under DevOps. So this could fall under DevOps. So let's start with the first item on the list, which is planning. When you develop software, you are developing software to solve a business need, period. So there is no point. The reason why you want to develop software is to solve a business need. So your software could be the main product you are offering to your customers, or your software could be a tool that you make use of to support your internal processes. So for example, if you are building a software that will serve as a product to your customers, then you have things like Uber and you have things like Slack. These tools, the software they develop is basically what they are offering to their customers. So, and when you want to design software for these businesses, the first thing you do is you go to the business, you try to get as much information from the business. What processes do they want their software to take care of? How do they want the software to solve their needs? So what you want to do is to gather as much information as possible from the customer, from the business, all their business processes, all their use cases, all their user stories. So that's what you try to capture here, because you need to know what you are designing. You need to know the reason why you are building the software for you to be able to build a proper software. So to get the reason and all the business side of the software design, then you have to do the planning. Then you have to also do the analysis. At the end of the planning and analysis phase, you have a document that is called business requirement document. And the person that takes care of the planning and the analysis phase is usually the business analyst. The business analyst is the one that is in charge of the planning and the analysis phase, because he is the one that interacts with the business. At the end of this session, you have your business requirement specification. It's a documentation that you prepare that you then hand over to the next guy, the next person on the pipeline. In this case, the designer, the UI UX designer. In most of the cases, the business analyst will work hand in hand iteratively with the designer as he is capturing the business needs. He is translating, he is relaying those needs to the designer, and the designer is essentially building out the interfaces and all what have you. What does the designer do? The job of a designer falls into two. He takes the documentation that has been produced by the business analyst and then work to sketch out the interface. That's the first point of contact between the user of the software and the software. It's called the interface. And interface design falls into two. We have the user interface design and the user experience design. The user interface design has to do with the looks and the style of the interface. That is to say, the first thing you see on your laptop or your desktop or your mobile phone is the interface, and the design, the look and the style of that interface is what user interface design is all about. You look at the style, the color, the typography, the button, all the styling and the rest. The user experience design has to do with the overall picture. User experience design has to do with the overall picture of the interface. How easy is it for a user to make use of? How desirable is the interface? How accessible is the interface? For example, in the modern era, if you are designing a software, you have to make provision for the impaired, like for the visually impaired. So that's what user experience is all about. How easy is it for a user to navigate across the software via the interface? So that is what the designer does. And at the end of his work, he's going to produce the user interface documentation. The user interface documentation is the designs. It could be an Adobe Photoshop document or just a sketch of how the interface should look like. That is what he will be producing and handing over to the software guys, the guys that will write the software or do the coding. Then, in addition to the UI UX design, we also have the main software design. Now, software design could be, many organizations don't really do software design. They just go straight into writing the software. But in mature organizations where it is compulsory, you do that, then software design becomes a step within the process. And what you do when you are designing software is you look at, okay, this business that I want to support by building this software, what architecture do I use? There are so many architecture you might want to explore. You might decide to ask, should I build a monolithic application or should I build a microservice application? So these are some of the things you do in the design phase. And another run of things you do in the design phase is to produce the design artifact, the software design artifact, which will include your class diagram. You could use the UML notation to produce the class diagrams and the activity diagrams and the sequence diagrams. So these are some of the things you produce when you are doing the software design. And once you've produced all this documentation, you compile everything in a document that is called software requirement specification. And the idea of this software requirement specification is you can take that documentation, give it to a developer or a coder, and the developer or a coder will just write the code for the software. In most cases, most organizations don't do software design. They just give you the UI, the interface design. You just go straight to building the software. Then once the interface design is ready, once the software design is ready and all the proper documentation have been produced, you now move over to software development. Within software development, this is where you develop the software properly. You develop the software using your programming languages. And within development, we have your front-end development, the back-end development, the database development. So these are the things you'll be working on, depending on the nature of the project. Once you are done with development, you move over to testing. Now, there are several testings you can do, but the most basic testing is what we call the unit testing. The unit testing happens could start from your software design. Within the software design, you specify the type of test that has to be carried out to demonstrate or to prove that the software is working as specified in the design document. So that's what the unit testing is all about. In most organizations, don't do unit testing, but it is a best practice. So you have to know about that. Then we have the integration testing. Integration testing has to do with the end-to-end functionality of the software. If the software has a front end, a back end, and a database, in integration testing, you want to see, does the software work properly when you interact with the software end to end, from the front end to the back end. Then another type of test we have is the acceptance test. Acceptance test is pretty much the final test you undertake before deploying the application for production or to any development environment. So once you are done with your testing, then you move over to deployment and maintenance. In deployment, you push your code to source control. Then from source control, depending on how you've implemented the source control, you could then decide, okay, after several confirmations and approval by maybe the business analyst to ensure that what you have built is exactly what he has captured from the business, then you can publish the application for consumption. Then we also have maintenance. Maintenance is another activity that you carry out during the software development lifecycle. And in maintenance, if something comes up when the software is in use, maybe there is a defect or a bug that crops up during the normal course of using the software, then you have to go back and start working and start all over again and make sure that you fix that issue. Or another form of maintenance could be, maybe you want to, if your software has gathered enough momentum and there are so many users using the software, you might want to scale the software so that it will allow many people to use the software. So that is another form of one thing you can do during maintenance. So that brings us to the last, the end of the main activities. So to summarize, when you come to work within the software industry, there are several steps, there are several activities that happens within a project, and that is what I've listed here. The planning, the analysis, and the design, and the development, and the testing, and the deployment. Then there is also, depending on the company, there is also the concept of project management. Project management should come, let's say, should happen throughout this life cycle. So project management should happen. This is project management. So project management should happen across all these. You also do project management across. So there are two types for project management approach. We have the waterfall and we have the agile or scrum. Most organizations today do agile, or most don't even do anything at all. So that brings us to the end of, you need to know this, because if you go for an interview or if you go to the industry, they might ask you what are some of the project lifecycle, and if you know this concept, then it becomes a lot easier. So that brings us to the last, to the conclusion of the main activities. Yeah, so the second item we have to look at today is your major markets. So if you go to the industry, you might want to decide, okay, which sector of the industry should I go into? And within the major market, we have some interesting aspects to kind of like working. One of the most promising major market for software development, or for software developer, because when you learn how to become a software developer, or when you become a software developer, you might want to decide, okay, which area of the economy do I want to go work in? So that's what I want to cover within these major activities. So I've kind of like identified some of the key areas that are promising and that pay very well. One of them is the financial sector. The financial sector continues to be the highest paying sector to go work in as a software developer. And then if you go work within this industry as a software developer, what will you be doing? Basically, financial industries work on top of software. So that is a given. The software is their mainstay, whether to kind of generate their investment strategies or to attend to their customers or to perform some analysis. You do a lot of quantitative financial data analysis. And what attracts software developers to the financial sector, what you'll be doing in the financial sector might range from developing the data analysis tools or helping investment decision makers to build tools, softwares that will automatically use artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data to develop investment strategies. So they call it quant investing. So that's the kind of thing, that's where the money is. So if you have a banking experience or if you have an accounting experience or anything in finance and you happen to learn software development, so that is the area you should go and focus on. That's within the financial sector. And you have big guys, big players in this sector like JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, all these Two Sigma, all these hedge funds, and so they need more of software developers with data that have data analysis knowledge and then financial knowledge. So that is a good area to go work in. Then the second one is the government. Yes, government sector is another area you could decide to work in. And why I mention government is that it is if you are in this part of the world, the developed part of the world, then most of the things you'll be doing, most of your interaction with the government will be through software, through computers, through online, through digital. So because of this, government need programmers. And that is one area to easily get a job in, especially if you are in the developed part of the world like US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, UK, Germany, all these areas. Government is working as a software developer within the government sector will be it's easier to get a job there, though they don't pay as much as the financial sector. Then another area you could look at is the startup sector. Almost startups are scattered across the world and they are constantly in need of software developers. In fact, if you go to LinkedIn and you look at some of the founders, you could see that even within their profile name description, they will attach that they are recruiting. So startups are constantly recruiting. If you're a software developer, that is an area you might want to look at. Then another area you might want to look at is working for a software development shop. A software development shop is basically a company that develops software for other companies. So we have some big guys in that sector as well, like Infosys, we have Tata, we have Wipro. These are all Indian companies. Then in Nigeria, we have things like Andela. So they help kind of like assign software developers to big companies. So you could work with those established software development shop. And the reason why, if you are young and you want to gain industrial experience within a dynamic environment where you will do so many projects, working for a software development shop is a good option. You might stay there, gain industrial experience, and then move over, to other big stuff. So I think that is all. Let me see if I have not mentioned. Let me see if there is anything I've not mentioned. So the last item there is the healthcare industry. Healthcare is another aspect of the industry that is constantly in need of software developer. If you are a medical doctor, if you are a pharmacist, if you are a nurse, or if you have any background within the health sector, and then you have interest in software, you learn software and augment your role with your software. That's a very big advantage for you. You could easily get a job because you are bringing your healthcare experience with your software development experience. You have far way advantage than somebody that maybe dropped out of, that does not have any other experience apart from a software developer. You have the domain knowledge and you have the software development knowledge. Generally speaking, if you have a professional career and then you want to switch over to software, you have an advantage. You have several advantages. One, you understand the concept of how organizations work. Two, you understand the concept of project management, how to lead a team, how to work with other team members. So these are the things you understand. Also, you understand the concept of producing reports. You know, in the industry, software developers don't generally, especially those that just learn how to code and start coding, they don't really know all these basic of office, produce report, produce document. They don't really care about all this. So if you have a professional experience, you have that advantage. So that is the thing we'll have to. That brings us to the concluding part of the major markets. So yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so then we move over to the third subtopic within this industry overview, which is the current industry trend. So within the current industry trend, I just want to highlight some of the things that are currently happening. Because if you learn how to develop software and you go for an interview, they might ask you, what is the current industry trend? So I've kind of like identified a couple of these trends. The number one trend within normal software development now currently is what we call progressive web application, PWA. If you browse through job openings, you will see that they listed that you must know how to do progressive web application development. So what is progressive web application? PWA, progressive web application is the philosophy that there has to be a way of bringing the benefit of desktop application and mobile application, the native desktop application and native mobile application to the web. If you are using a desktop application, you will notice that everything is very smooth, and even if there is no internet, you could continue using your software, you could continue performing some basic activity. So progressive web application intends to bring those benefits to the web. So that is one trend, progressive web application. So another trend that is happening in the industry is microservices. Almost everybody wants to do microservice. And what microservice does is, normally if we are developing software, we have several architectures, and one of those architectures is monolithic application development. And then we now have microservice application development. In monolithic application development, all the functionalities you have to implement for your software will be in one software. But in microservice architecture, you can split your functionalities into individual functionalities and then implement those individual functionalities in different tiny applications. So those little application is what we call microservices. And why are organizations transitioning to microservices? The problem with monolithic application is that as your company start growing and as you start employing more developers, as so many people start using your application, it becomes a bit strenuous to manage that single application. Like if you have 3 teams working on 3 different parts of the application, there is always the tendency that they will be clashing. There will be clash in terms of, okay, this is working, you are stepping on top of what these guys are working. So the people decided, okay, let's do microservices. And the problem microservices try to solve is, it is not possible for teams to work independently. That's the benefit of microservices. Teams can now work independently. And another benefit is that you can deploy in monolithic, any change you make, you have to deploy the whole application. But in microservice, if you make a change in, let's say, microservice A, it doesn't affect that change in microservice A does not affect other microservices. So these are some of the benefits of microservice architecture. Then another trend that is happening in the industry is serverless architecture. And serverless architecture works hand in hand with microservices architecture. And what serverless architecture tries to do is, normally if you are building an application, whether monolithic or microservice, you have to build your application, put it in your server and host the server. But industry experts decided, okay, there are some functionalities that you don't necessarily want to start going through the process of building an application, building the source control, deploying to your server. So why don't we have what we call our serverless infrastructure? So if you want to implement a functionality, all you need to do is to write a small code that implement that functionality, and then deploy your code to that serverless infrastructure. So that serverless infrastructure is owned by, let's say, service providers like Amazon Web Services or Azure. All you need is, anytime you need that piece of functionality, you call that code. Of course, they will provide you with the API that you can use to call your own code that is hosted in their own serverless infrastructure. And you don't pay them, unlike when you deploy your own application in your server where you pay as far as that server is running. In microservice architecture, you only pay when you call your service, when your service is in use, and most of the time your service will not be in use. So that is the benefit of serverless architecture. It is a current trend in the industry, and it is very good to know about that. Then another trend in the industry is, of course, we all know about it, artificial intelligence and the machine learning. So it is a current trend in the industry, and what machine learning tries to do for you is, we are producing, in the industry, we are producing a lot of data, and businesses could benefit from those data. But the problem is that sometimes if you want to use the normal programming to analyze those data, it becomes very troubling, it becomes very untenable. So, but you can instruct a computer to use a model you will develop to kind of learn everything it needs to know about the pile of data you have, so that it could be able to give you insight and that you can use for your business decisions. So that is basically what AI and machine learning is all about. You can always read through some of these items. Then the last industry trend I want to talk about is blockchain. Blockchain technology is another industry trend that you might need to know about. And personally, I like blockchain, and I'll be doing some projects on blockchain. But the problem is that businesses have not really understood how they could benefit from blockchain, and why should I discard my application for blockchain? So they have not really seen that benefit of doing that. Once they see the benefit, then it will be a mainstay. For now, it's just like something people are always, okay, maybe we just try and learn what blockchain is. So largely that brings us to the conclusion of industry overview. So we've looked at the main activities that happens in the software development industry. We looked at some of the major market, and I said that the financial sector is the place that will pay you more. So if you have finance background, or if you are a mathematician and you understand computer, the financial sector is the area, and there are so many companies that are in the financial sector that are looking for software developers. Then we have the current industry trend. The current industry trend, I mentioned things like microservices, serverless architecture, and blockchain. So that largely brings us to the end of the first segment, which is industry overview. So thank you very much. Bye.